very top speed. We'll let you know like verbally like clear speed during your speeches if it becomes a problem. The second thing is that we could become just like overwhelmed for any number of reasons, and we just ask them to stop molesting and composure.
All right. Sound good to me? Has Dylan already given you my email? Okay, cool.
So not your best chair.
Sworn there were more chairs in here last debate.
It'll be all right. Awesome. All right. We did triple Lester. Yeah.
But is anybody not ready? First is why I'm afraid of doctors by Autistic Koya. Doctors are supposed to save lives. That's the oath they take. Hospitals are supposed to be where anyone can know they'll be safe. Where you could be Barack Obama or Paris Hilton or Osama, and it wouldn't matter because doctors are there to save your life and make sure you're okay. But let's talk about what happened Easter Sunday 2013. Let's talk about what happened to my friend Amanda Baggs. Amanda Baggs, published author, nationally known activist, pioneer of autistic rights, autistic culture, autistic community. She was in a hospital. I guess she a priest is something I don't quite understand, but I know because she told me. But the whole community that all she needed was a feeding tube so she wouldn't die. Standard procedure, no big deal. Then the doctor came to her room, tried to tell her not to go through with it, tried to tell her to consider the alternative. You know what the alternative means. When they say consider the alternative, what they're really saying is your life really isn't worth saving. So instead of waiting for the operation, you should get around to starting dying. She almost died. The doctors, the ones who are supposed to save Amanda's life, almost murdered her because she's autistic, because she's disabled, because her life isn't worth saving. And you know, it only became worth saving when hundreds of us who care called and told the hospital, no, you cannot do that. No, you cannot murder Amanda Baggs. No, you cannot kill people just because they're disabled. No, you are wrong. So they did the operation. They did it without anesthesia. They said, squeeze her hand if it hurts. And she screamed. She fucking screamed. And they didn't care. And they kept going. And they didn't even have the decency to give her the right pain meds after her able, typical roommate was fine, but Amanda wasn't. The fuck's a retard like me matter anyway. And the sad thing, the funny thing, is Amanda's one of the lucky ones. Because people like her. People recognize those names. So they'll call the hospital, tell those bastards where they can put it for her. The rest of us, people like me, most of my friends, if it happens to us, who will ever know? They'll kill us with the machinery that's been grinding on for years, specializing in ending disabled lives because we're not human, we're subhuman, we're burdens, voicing on societies and families, undeserving of our pitiful existences. They'll murder us. And who will listen? The fuck retards like us matter anyway. Amanda Baggs was seen as a deviant individual because of her failure to meet the ableist normative ideas of how a body should act. Her impairments are scripted as being failures. The failure to talk and the failure for her body to work normally. Even though we all have different impairments and capabilities, when a certain range is reached, impairments such as Amanda's are scripted as disabilities. Society decides these impairments are a failing of a body and need to be disrupted in order for a body to be good or useful. These bodies need to be excluded through medical institutions where they can torture us and forget about us or cause psychological violence from assimilatory practices like ABA therapy in an attempt to fix these violent failures. And the paradigm of what it means to be successful is propagated in products of suicide and physician-assisted suicide. Physician-assisted suicide is an attempt by non-stable individuals to avoid becoming failures, to avoid the possibility of losing independence or the failure to control one's bowels, the failure to speak properly and communicate. These ideals are always tied up with the ableist notion of what it means to be truly human. This is Angry Black Woman in 14. Brittany Maynard decided to commit suicide because she has a malignant brain tumor. Many folks are saying how brave she is. If this woman didn't have a medical condition, we would be begging her not to do it. I'm sick and tired of suicide being romanticized for people with disabilities, yet vilified for non-disabled folks. Why is it that Disabled folks are considered brave for killing ourselves. It goes back to better dead than disabled. We are presumed to be confident in our abilities, including the act of living is called into question. Society doesn't mind if we die out. If they can't do it by abortions and cures, and they can do it by killing us by euthanasia or coercing us to kill ourselves via this death with dignity for us. This coercion telling us not only that we have a right but the duty to die. Physician-assisted suicide is leading us down the path of the day where we won't have a choice. And these fears of disability are perpetuated within the pedagogical system. Disability has become the organizing procedure for oppressed bodies within neoliberal schools. Capitalism uses it as a big creative baseline by which it judges productivity, efficiency, and success. It is our affirmation of failure to transform notions of productivity and elucidates differentiated ways that the neoliberal school system affects different bodies. This is Arabelle's in 2000. The first special education classes house the urban-born immigrants, Native Americans, and African Americans. Based on intelligence scales, explored a relationship between mental illness, race, class, and gender. This segregation was justified by the logic of disability, but these students were unable to meet the normal standards of the regular classroom. Public education has used disability to separate regular and special education that assigns students by race, class, and gender to lower tracks in the educational matrix that correspond within the larger social and economic order. Despite the move to integrate students with disabilities, new labels like at-risk, learning disabled, emotionally handicapped, gifted, and talented have emerged in order to resegregate children. Special classes continue to be populated by students that have been marked by race, class, or gender. Special education through disability appeals to notions of efficiency, rationality, and equity in order to dominate class relations, division, labor, and cultural hegemony. Dominant discourses continue to locate the failure to succeed within the individual. The underlying logic of disability is not undergone any drastic transformation. There's an increasing need to be smart to succeed. Poor, able-bodied individuals seek to distance themselves from disability. We may be poor, black, or female/queer, but we are not stupid. Disability is the organizing grounding principle in the construction of the categories of gender, race, and class within the context of schooling. And to perpetuate similar views on disability that are exclusive and violent. There aren't a lot of openly disabled debaters because to be disabled openly is to fail to be normal. The paradigm of success pushes out the possibility of open disabled participation. Deaf individuals need to be entirely deaf. Blind debaters entirely blind. Physically disabled people must always be in their cane or wheelchair. We constantly have to perform our disability or we become discounted and ignored. The community actually promotes our assimilation by silencing our dissent, by regarding our complaints as trivial and simply a failure to participate in an expected way. Debate offers us up to judge our health, our capacity to be successes, and diagnose our failures with measures such as low speaker points. You know you had a great speech, or you started too much, you didn't hold good eye contact, you interrupted cross-sects too much, you are okay being here, but you can't truly be one of us until you overcome your failures. We Crips understand that we must fail to affirm the topic. The inclusion of PAS means that we must always fail because we are forced to discuss whether or not our very lives are worth living. To be successful, we have to divorce our experiences from ourselves. Thus, we must always be unsuccessful to be ethical in the current discussions of PAS. And we have chosen what side we are on, and it is against the one that makes us assimilate into a violent topic and community. Embrace a curricular epistemology, a pedagogy that actually embraces our Crip success, the failure to assimilate into the neoliberal educational order that is debate. Mitchell et al. 14. If one can be included only by passing as non-stable, then the value of Crip/queer experiences is lost from traditional pedagogical practices. Failure is necessary when educational inclusion operates as a neoliberal philosophy. Diversity initiatives to get some stable students in the door while leaving the vast majority of Crip/queer students behind. Curricular epistemologies openly advocate for the productive potential of failing normalization practices, because such goals entail erasing recognition of the alternative Crip/queer lives. The neoliberal school attempts to resolve the accommodations of disability through downplaying rather than drawing from people's differences. What appears to disabled students the capacity to keep up turns out to be a purposeful failure to accomplish objectives of normalization. Crip success is to fail to become normie. This inversion to read non-normative lives as failing standards enables Crip/queer people to pursue other modes of existence. Curricular epistemologies undertake pedagogical practices devalued by normative neoliberal educational context. The critique acknowledges the increasingly disciplinary nature of public education's normalizing objectives. A failure to thrive is understood as the product of active refusal. Inclusionism, in other words, covers up an unethical promotion of the successes of the few based upon normal standards of achievement from the accuracy of the many. With a curricular epistemology, disability metamorphoses from successful normalization into a meaningful alternative site for transforming pedagogical practices and veiled social identities. And lastly is practice by Laura Hershey. You do not need a better body, a pure spirit, or a PhD to be proud. You do not need a lot of money, a handsome boyfriend, or a nice car. You do not need to be able to walk or see or hear or use big complicated words or do any of those things that you just can't do to be proud. A caseworker cannot make you proud, or a doctor. You only need more practice. You get proud by practicing. You can add your voice all night to the voices of 150 others in a circle around a jailhouse where your brothers and sisters and non-binary cousins are being held for blocking buses with no lifts, or you can be one of the ones inside the jailhouse, knowing of the circle outside. You can speak your love to a friend without fear. You can find someone who will listen to you without judging you or doubting you or being afraid of you and let you hear yourself, perhaps for the very first time. These are all ways of getting proud proud. None of them are easy, but all of them are possible. You can do all of these things, or just one of them again and again. You get proud by practicing. Power makes you proud, and power comes in many fine forms, supple and rich as butterfly wings. It's music when you practice opening your mouth and liking what you hear. It's sunlight when you practice singing, strength and beauty in everyone, including yourself. It's dance when you practice knowing that the way you do and the way you do it is the right way for you and cannot be called wrong. Remember, you weren't the one who made you ashamed, but you are the one who can make you proud. Just practice. Practice until you get proud, and once you are proud, keep practicing so you won't forget. You are proud of practicing.
Okay. So I want to start by talking about the process of physician-assisted suicide. How does one go about being subjected to a PAS?
I mean, there's a litany of different things that can kind of happen. The one I see isolates, so the instance of Amanda Baggs is not supposed to give an example of PAS, but one in which doctors made choices for a disabled patient and risked her life.
Okay. So how, I guess, is physician-assisted suicide practiced in the status quo?
Practice, there's like secret euthanasias, yes.
Yeah, like
but I mean, those are controlled by the dominant ideology.
Is there a difference between PAS and euthanasia?
I mean, you might create that distinction. We don't view there as being a very strong one in the first place.
Okay.
But there's still also places like Oregon, you know.
Yeah,
that do have
it's not legalized in the squad, but that doesn't change the fact that this is effectively the same thing.
Okay, so if it's happening in the status quo, I'm curious, what does the affirmative do to change the practice of PAS in the status quo?
What does any AF do? Like, our AF is about how debate propagates messed up notions of disability and is violent and exclusive in that context, especially the inclusion of PAS.
Okay, so your argument is just like, or not just like, but a portion of your argument is that inclusion of PAS in the topic is bad because it exposes ableism in the debate community.
Yeah, and like we never get to really have those debates because people don't choose to read PAS apps against us.
Okay, is PAS the only topic area that deals with?
It's the one that explicitly does so.
It's the one that says disability is entirely undesirable. There's no other thing that comes even close to these courses.
So I guess my question is, isn't it a good thing and showing progress for the debate community
That
that
we
no one
only
chooses
have
to
one
read
fucked
PAS?
up topic area rather than 5?
But that no one chooses to read it.
No. People only choose not to read it against us. There are tons of apps, such as, I can't remember what code, but like a Liberty team read a PAS Good for Economy app. There are examples of these things that we never get to.
So,
there's teams that
When teams read these apps, why is it not like okay to just say that that's ableist when
Because, you know, other teams still allude to this because they're not one-off disability studies teams, which I think we would provide a very unique debate. Plus 2 is that, no, even if other teams reading that app is good, we don't get that education.
Why do you have to be a disability studies team to, promote education about
I'd
ableist
say
debate?
that people are probably more afraid of me and Chris on PAS than say like Weaver HT because they aren't like reading disability studies lit all the time, right?
that's why
so,
they,
because
that's why they hit a PSF this morning and we have.
Yeah, they also debated it at our districts. Everyone in our districts was like, nah, Gonzaga's not going to read their PAS applicants too. Why would they? And they didn't.
Okay, so I guess why does that education have to come exclusively from one-off disability studies teams? Why can't that
It
education
can
be
come from others. We just think that we're a very valuable source of that information, and we never get to on it.
Okay. So,
It'll be to authenticate the motion. Let me know when y'all heard it.
Yep, I have it up.
Okay. Topicality. Topical affirmatives must affirm resolution to instrumental defense of the United States legalization. One of the topic areas is common result. Reading poetry must be a specific example of the resolution. First, the definitions. Resolve means a policy that means in House and 5. Resolution, legislative instrument for making policy, should requires action. HG2K. Should the rule to do something have something take place. United States means instrumental adoption. U.S. Code 14. United States means instrumentality. United States and legalization requires law. Means here in 12. Legalization is legislation that provides mechanism for government regulations. Examples include licensing, registration, geographic age restrictions, and other rules. We have two scenarios. First is competitive equity. 3 internal links. A. Final discussion. They explode the number of potential assets, removing the incentive for the net. 2. Conduct in-depth reading on research, which is debate's primary benefit, is certainly constrained discussions force creativity while preserving the use for non-traditional forms of evidence. B is equitable ground. The resolution is purposely designed to be perfect. They stack the deck by reducing the affirmative burden to defending their claim of choice. This is a prior question because all substantive questions are influenced by their decision to unilaterally decision to determine negative ground. C is switch side debate. Yeah, says that one of the topic areas is bad. Their model of debate is educationally bankrupt because it encourages individuals to just retrench their own beliefs instead of deliberate over arguments and come to a refined conclusion. Researching and debating a position doesn't make you believe it. Debate fosters tolerance and decision making without moral responsibility. This is Muir 93. Switch side debate respects the existence of divergent beliefs, but focuses attention on the assessing validity of opposing belief system. Confusion over plurals and tolerance. Because of relativism doctrine, there's no right or wrong answers. But it's the most serious barrier to moral education. Pluralism requires respecting the right to hold divergent beliefs. It applies in neither tolerance nor of actions based on those beliefs, nor respecting the content of those beliefs. Exposure hardly commits them to mistaken values. Force the gain from the real world can be seen as means of gaining perspective out of obligating students to validate their political view structure through moral actions. The second scenario, debate should be a training ground for navigating institutions. Legal changes are an indispensable aspect of achieving social equality for disabled people. This is Hoskins and 8 for those people who continue to experience social marginalization. The appropriate policy responses to change the social environment law, legal institutions affect individuals sharing that identity theory, despite much skepticism of the relevance of legal rights to disadvantaged groups in society. Critical ability theory embraces legal rights as an indispensable tool to advance equality claims disabled people to promote their integration into all aspects of society, while at the same time evaluating and coming to welcoming the diversity of disabled people bring to their community. CDT does not reject liberal rights and exposes the ways in which liberal rights theory has failed to respond adequately to the needs and interests of disabled people individually and collectively by failing to incorporate diversity of disabled people and the disabled community within the scope of the conception of equality. CDT provides the local basis for different policy responses to disability. This policy bringing this being policies inclusion, equality, and autonomy, critical jurisprudence of disability, and identifies appropriate sources of oppression within the law and legal institutions by seeks relief people from that oppression and identifies the potential positive role the law seeks to create the law using law to release the legal institutions to struggle for emancipation disabled people with rationale for CDT itself. Should I read that or not?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. Next up is the global systems. Okay. The app is folk politics. They're focused on embodying knowledge and local relations of power. Abstract displaces abstract structural analysis. Failure to begin with global analysis lacks an oppression. Ceramic, letting the risk of relying on people powers that actors fall back on the habitual ideas because they can't imagine the alternative. This is the crisis. How cognitive limits peer review. They have to think through alternative system. Adherence to folk politics avoidance. From the systematic thinking in favor of immediate bodily action. Taking shot by cop. The purchase becomes a sign of success. It displaces conflicts around structures to physical individuals. The other systems determine our complexity experience becomes as a deferred distance. It's much more intuitive for individuals to protest. It is chase out causal chains and uncover abstract spaces of contention. Yet others are exponentially more effective, albeit less exciting. The identity politics became the pathway for student flows were immersed in an opportunity cost dictated. This was the expense of training. The result leftists consider themselves incapable of doing economic work was we do not the basis of training required to grapple nuances and details of modern economies and when I see injection of disability scholarship into debate an act that is decided comes from a decidedly hegemonic northern perspective this part of a trend of disability studies which ignores the global dimensions of ableism and raises the perspectives of indigenous peoples in the global south as goodly. Hawthorne, 13 medical disability studies have failed to engage the global south. 82% of disabled people live in the global south, whilst disabled people do. They make up the majority of what they get excluded from global stations and claims universality, ignore their ignorance of the resistance to ultimate position of the global southerners, southwestern foundations. Disability studies has reached hegemonic status in the majority exportation ideas from the north to south continues. Debated this seems to be legitimate by numerous factors. Some of the disability theories right from the western transfer all across the globe with fewer modifications. This transfer and position of epistemologies akin to imperialism, empowerment now. The effect is extinction from a plethora of global threat systemic evaluation creates space for effective individual survival, but not the other way around. This is not the four. The solutions can only be effective at the local level. We remove ourselves from solving these problems, which most concern is climate change, that war peace, the balance of trade can be addressed globally without global measures as possible. So work to distribute wealth from rich nations, tax rich control, shipment of toxic waste ban, minimize prevent the use of nuclear weapons, rubber, these are only what we need, most critical issues, leaving most other critical issues for other people. The absence of effective global politics, global solutions will always be undermined by communities who do not share our vision by first building global politics, we establish a global sphere in which global alternatives can flourish. We the governments to others in those institutions will solutions one by one. The alternatives to should go negative to the logically endorsed world systems analysis. The alternative solves starting with the global space, the local, treating particular material, social, discursive formations in isolation. Only our method explains the source of violence the act criticizes and is capable of developing progressive practice to combat global threats. This is Engel, Mario, 9 alternative frameworks, but overcome the limitation of creative microanalysis and analyzing the larger scale structuring factors direct to the political ecology provided by the region, not become certain systematic relational changes of the world scale shape of the regional economic environment, people environment relations should be closely analyzed. Shed light on how regions even come to being. Weakness of due to limiting systemic processes as well as skills. Understanding discursive processes and policy world systems. Research concentrate on investigating large spatio-temporal scales. Define contextual units, attention, speed, and process speed. Beyond boundaries to reconstruct frameworks of relations by seeing the local and global world systems. Productively, ever political ecology research away from highly problematic propensity to focus on or to favor microscale empowerment as a solution to a case. Advocacy groups check the impact of Johnson navigate this mind circuit checks concerns about discrimination against the disabled. Such discrimination is unlikely to be unlikely because organizations representing the disabled are sufficiently active politically, sufficiently vigilant. They would soon to call the need for to employ assisted suicide in a manner that affected their clients unfairly and working in the Netherlands. Just approved regulations to solve reasons why PAS would be bad for disabled folk. This is Cario. There's a Cario at 14. It's a high risk for the elderly, only underserved, the education class, the poor, physically disabled, or chronically ill minors, people with psychiatric illnesses, including depression, racial ethnic minorities from statutes in again the Netherlands. And performance is not a mode of resistance. It gives too much power to the audience. The performer is structurally blocked from controlling the presentation, the representation of the representations appealing to the balance. We have turning over one's identity, the same reproductive economy that provides liberalism. This is Fallon 96. Performance is only skip the card. The act doesn't solve, it doesn't change, can't change material conditions as Gumbos. People with disabilities have been by equal recognition or society's disability. Disabled laws need to be raised by enabling ones as well. Require a tremendous amount of legislative or social exclusion. It's also for offended persons with disabilities to be part of the public sphere. You ready?
Mm-hmm. Okay. What would it mean to properly analyze like world politics? Like, what's the bright line for it? You're too folky.
I think the Goodley and Hawthorne evidence, which is the evidence that we read that's specific to your method, specifically says that things like that.
Critical disability
critical
studies
disability
doesn't
studies.
apply to the globe in the local context. Yes, I read that.
Yeah.
Before. But I mean, so how? I still want to know what's the bright line.
I
Like,
think
how do
what-
we get to properly world
The
focused?
Cyrenaic evidence says that you have to focus on in a global context,
Right. We talk about.
not just countries or individual
Okay,
parts
Chris
of
has
our
a
identity.
okay. How does your disability studies perspective get to the point of your disability justice, which is a very different field of disability studies?
I guess what's the question?
Well, how does like you're talking about disability studies? How does that affect the efforts disability justice?
I mean, we'll defend that critical disability studies in general, or defend a position, an epistemology that is inherently from the global north and
Can you employ epistemology from the global south?
I mean, we think that that's what we should endorse as part of the alternative.
Okay, I mean, but still, can you perform and do that? Like, I want to know.
We probably will if we make this argument in the block, yeah.
But we don't have to.
We also don't have to because we advocate the alternative as a research practice itself, not
Okay, so
the
why can't we
performance of
integrate those research practices into the app?
because the Cyrenaic evidence is really good on the question of when you start with the local, you get satisfied with local
Okay.
solutions that are inevitably reappropriated by the global system.
Let's talk about the switch side debate claims that we re-entrench things more responsibility. How does this grapple with the fact that we never get to read PAS bad?
Do you want to?
Yeah, I think that one, if you not being able to read PAS band is probably a good thing because it means that other teams are making the choice to not.
Excuse me, now continue. Let me continue here. So it means that they choose not to only when we're in the room,
I don't
but
think
literally the
that's-
rest of the time, like Gonzaga SW read their PAS robots app at our
Okay.
districts.
You can name specific teams. We don't think that that's a reason
Sure.
why y'all should win.
Right, I mean,
It's valid topic.
We have examples though of, so I mean, how else do we provide for this education?
Sure, so we think topical version of the app could be using other topic areas
To talk about how bad PAS is in the
No, but to talk about how those can impact
Okay,
ableism.
so it's a topical version of AF, not RF though, right?
Well, your app is anti-topical. There is no perfect T version of your app, but that's a neg argument.
Right, okay, but I mean, why shouldn't people be forced to justify the resolution?
Well, they should when they're F.
Right,
We are
but-
negative.
Only when, we never get to be the resolution is never justified in this context of PAS?
I think that it's pretty messed up that you're forcing us to defend a topic area we don't want to defend because it's ableist.
Let me just make a quick question, context. But then why do we have to defend that?
You can pick a different topic area.
But then, so no one talks about PAS and no one gets that
Let
education?
me clear this up.
Like,
You have said PAS is bad. We think that
We can talk about
forcing us to
the
defend
other
that is
topic.
bad also. But we think that our situation is uniquely different because we are negative. We are forced to negate you, which puts us in a distinct position.
Get rid of this one. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, sure. Can you take it out? Because I want to take it out of the.
Oh, funny question. Why'd y'all strike through the word physically impaired?
Which card?
Like felony 96. One of the case cards.
It was the case card.
Yeah, Johnson.
We thought we would use the same language that y'all use.
We use the word impairment, right? You seem to be focusing more on the rhetorical aspect of these things, right?
We're just trying to mimic rhetoric.
I just find it kind of laughable, almost, to be fair. You don't be afraid to use the word impaired.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, stuff prep 707. Is that remaining? Oh, forgot. So you're using flash strips for less than once. Order will be case, then the global K, and then the great framework functionality. Same difference.
One with enters.
The one with
Maybe just that's it.
Case KT.
Yeah.
same.
It's a little bit weird now. I don't know why.
That's okay. You'll have it up?
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, just ready?
Yep.
Okay. RF is one of curricular epistemology of affirming the failure to be reintegrated in the neoliberal spaces that have been put for us, We refuse to affirm PS because through it, disability becomes something to be assimilated, tokenized in liberal society, or rejected, swept away into the realm of the unthought, and treated violently. What are the pedagogical spheres of the medicinal, industrial complex, and prison system that can lead to our extermination? Debate reinforces the paradigms of corporate through notions of PS being good for disabled people that implicate our outside relations. For people we do know that are terminally ill or in chronic pain, PS and the rest cause us to devalue those lives. And we practice being proud of not fitting in, of demanding accommodations on our own terms, because we recognize that the system was built for us to fail. Our active failures is being proud of who we are and what makes us disabled people. Only then can we learn from each other to recognize their failed bodies and find other ways that queers, women, and individuals of color can find ways of living in the system driven by success. Only our outright refusal can help break down these violent educational structure that's mentioned in 14. And changing knowledge progress, which Campbell 8. The Reformation has been an intermediate level of function, structure, institution, shifting values in the culture arena can contain serious historical omissions regarding the disability, able-bodied lens towards disability. Disability can be examined and taught from the perspective of the other. It asserts that preferred ability, cultural expulsoriness of the norms of ableism. Ableism transcends structures of governing for civil society, locates itself in the genealogies of knowledge, institutions, social relations, presume ableness, construct person with disabilities, marginalized and visible others. Is the formation of naturalized understanding fully speaking of the normative system and political theory is the reasonable man of law is the outcome of a political constitution on the line by line. Their first part is talking about how advocacy groups solve. I think they go to the point where things like mandate bags are still happening on it every day. That individuals can throw their artistic children off a bridge. The advocacy groups do not solve the fact that the ableist are permeate society also does not come to the analysis of the genealogy of knowledge. The Campbell card is right about talks about next they talk about how already the Netherlands proves that there is not. Proves that there is not assisted suicide after this test school. Often this is not talking about things like Amanda Bags, where she wasn't disabled yet. She was perceived as going to be disabled and was able to kill herself quickly, so she was able to deal with these things. Also, this is not taking into account over 300 individuals that were left off this list, in addition to people that were killed by mobile suicide squads. This is completely inaccurate. Also, the Netherlands examples have been from 30 years. They are not taking into account the people with disabilities because they've already been killed in the first place. And yeah. And then on the same material analysis, however, there's only so much we can do in debate. We're doing the structure of the I think the practice model is pretty good on the fact that we are doing the best that we can in debate. We are recognizing the material structures. We're doing the way that we can of affirming and changing the structures around us to make it so we can make them less ableist and less terrible. But however, we're not able to entirely break down the structures. That's why we have things with the 1EC to continually rail against these things and not having one static notion of how these things should be. On to the global game. First, it's going to be a huge problem here. First, the Goodley and Lawthorne card that turns the entirety of the rest of the K. It talks about how a universal approach to things like disability are bad for the entirety of the world because it locks in imperialist ideals. I don't think that when he sees the chance to be able to lock these forms of ideals, they merely state that we are the Northern putting on everybody else. We are recognizing from our own subject position for people in the U.S. and a couple other, like some European countries, that this is the unique way that we are all in a very similar situation. We do not propagate this away out to the global south. The only one who doubts to do that is the negative, which means you're going to be looking against their type. You're looking against the alternative. The first card, and also this is the way that I've made this announcement about this is the only way we can be able to engage in these structures is through systematic debate. They did not give them a chance of pedagogy. How do we affect pedagogy of the global south? We are not unable to do that in the system of debate, but we are right able to take a chance in these structures to make it less ableist, to make people recognize that PS is fucked up for disabled people. We shouldn't have to be able to deal with these structures, and also that pedagogy is always a key for us to be able to make these types of relations. And local relations are necessary for us to be able to make the systems less oppressive. Yes, there might be other places where we're able to make it less oppressive, but we have to start here because it's the place we're able to work in the first place. Also, in the Monmouth card, it says that it's always saying that we should be able to talk about these large utilitarian impacts, but never goes to the specificity of the way that disability and other forms of oppression are being talked about. It talks about climate change and other things and how those influence the world, but we never be able to talk about disability. It's always pushed on the back burner as something that's not important and not good enough for us to talk about. Also, there's probably you should probably frame through this in proximity. We have a better chance to be able to solve through the psychological violence that happens through things like debate instead of their huge, like climate change. I don't think the negative has a chance with the critiques to be able to solve for climate change, but I do think we have a better chance of being able to solve the psychological violence that happens from systems like debate. They say that we should be able to have like an universal world system. I think Mark's analysis is pretty devastating to the cross-sections, but they cannot inform like why they can speak for the global south, but we can't. It's an inherent contradiction that means the alternatives doing nothing else.
We pay attention to our specific conditions under neoliberal capitalism.
Yeah, we also look at our specific conditions of neoliberal capitalism. It's necessary to break this down, which means that is not only a materialistic perspective, but also allows us to have a better chance to be able to affect other types of structures that are broader. And Chris is not able to do that. Also, it's only talking about policies, not individuals. Permutation be bold. There's no reason why they're mutually exclusive. On the framework. Counter-interpretation. Critics can be failures in the context of PS. We are all responsible for topics that are signed by this PS, but PS is uniquely harmful. Further, a majority of PS debates happen without disabled debaters in the room, meaning we can't call the violence in our community, which means that the interpreters uniquely keep the whole debate accountable. This could have allowed for a nuanced debate on whether or not defending legalization of PS is justified with disabled bodies. It doesn't create a unique explosion of ground, but allows for discussion of disabled debaters on this topic. They can still win a process counterplan or legalization of PS good. And our failure is not passive one, but an active continual refusal for our form of practicing. We must be able to practice self-love and community. This team telling us to hit ourselves through violent resolution. What type of political strategies we're able to make it a question of what DC presents. And they're going to say that we have to engage disability by other types of acts, but they can't access this. Our simple act of failure. They say yes, there is not a topical version of everything. Yes, there isn't, because there's a specific act of refusal where you have to be able to talk about these sort of things and talk about specific ways in which PS is key. Also, there's going to be a very big disadvantage here, the fact that we will never be able to talk about PS in the world of the negative interpretation because PS just goes away. We no longer get to have these discussions. We aren't able to call out the type of violence that happens here in the first place, let alone even be able to try and legalize it. That also is going to be a key thing you're going to look for on the education page, the fact that they're taking out an entire portion of the topic for education. And the next interim says that our failure has no place in this space, because the status quo reifies assimilatory practices like our Mitchell evidence talks about. And behavioral training framework is part of the disciplinary practice of education. The vinegar, the yelling, the shocks that disabled people receive through processes of behavioral modification that force forms of psychological violence. This leads single people not only hating ourselves for not being normal, we internalize the sentiments that our words are always incorrect. Really losing the framework and T version of the act, really could have read makes us afraid to talk about what we find important. It teaches us not to speak for ourselves. The impact is that single people are placed in the double bind of assimilation or self-extermination. Suicide occurs because autistic people feel forced divorced from social relations, or we bully others and force them in ourselves to disassociate from them and our core selves to fit in. And able to explain the attempt of the framework to cause disability is something that can be spoken for within political spheres or race their subjectivity, especially in the context of PS, where able-bodied from our decide what is good for us. That means we never get to hear disabled individuals experience on topics like PS. It uniquely implicates their experience and prevents other ways of engagement being able to break performance of oppression in places like debate and pedagogical spheres. And embodiment is that. Imagining ourselves in privileged positions re-entrenches the practice that individuals use to try and get rid of disability, whether through cures or ignoring it. Has no practical value in our life. It's really dream of a perfect body. Further devaluing those bodies, which will never be perfect. We are told to suck it up and just try hard. They could be not disabled if they try hard enough. And second, on all the law arguments, instead the law analysis from what you see the standard notions of velocity to focus on the similarities there are differences which excludes those that are not textbook definition disabled. Let's get reintegrated into pedagogical systems where we get isolated and we get pitied, and then we have individuals who discipline us. This is also going to go against all their institutions. They will be able to navigate institutions. Disabled individuals are not here in the first place. They ignore us and talk us out of Congress because we are too different. The fact that they have tons and tons of laws for us, but they do not have individuals who are disabled in Congress is probably pretty damning. They're talking about critical disability theory. I think they made a pretty good announcement. Disability justice is looking for the justice of the globe. It's not looking for this a part of legal law that is not disability. Do not count this as your ordinary disability theory. Next thing is they talk about the water evidence, how we are going to protect people from discrimination. I think that's not working. The fact that the manufacturer was almost killed, individuals are still thrown off of bridges in Oregon because their parents they cannot stop parents from killing their autistic children. I think that's pretty damning on suicide debate. Suicide is impossible for disabled people at PAS because it's inherently violent and risks disabled extermination. And they would have to be complicit with this violence. People don't read the PSS. I think we already made this analysis above the means. We are the key to be able to have any kind of education from PAS, and our education is best for debate. We allow in-depth discussion of the PAS policies, allow for disabled people to give further in-depth analysis of how PS operates within a unique educational area that NEC does not allow. This is a prereq to any other policy or decision-making on PS and disability. Our act is the only way that we can learn from queer individuals and similar practices. Renders nothing will lose any of the education we learn learning from those experiences. Our provincial evidence is pretty good on that question. And on ground, they still can read all methods, starting points, and frames and focus. There's not any unique things that we don't allow. We said that they can have PAS bad. PS good. There's no reason why that is inherently bad. The fact that they say that they're not going to defend it is not our fault. That's them wanting to take up parts of the topic.
If suicide debate is true,
If suicide debate is true, then they should be able to defend things like PAS good. And they should have those cards. No unique ground loss.
Ready? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. So you said that you isolate under your interpretation that the two neg ground things that you isolate are PAS good and process counterplans.
And we also talked about like alt methods, frames, focus. There's lots of different things you could do, but these are unique things that are meeting our
we
interpretation.
also definitely linked to like fear of death case.
Yeah.
That was been ran against us.
Yeah, like the neg will probably always have links to Ks. We're curious about the policy education around PAS that we can.
I think we've made that pretty clear that legalization of PS, we have in-depth PS discussions, where the point where you say you don't want to have those debates just means that you're not willing to write up that part of the topic, which means we are the only ones that
Let's
have
talk
any
about
education.
process. Let's talk about process counterplans first. Y'all didn't read an advocacy. How do you like?
We say
process
PS
counterplan?
bad.
Yeah, what process counterpoint do we get?
We have lost on the process counter plan of implement like regulations or safeguards for PAS to protect disabled people. Literally, just like our app is PAS bad. Any feasible defense from PAS, which would probably be in your neg file for process counter plans, would be a reasonable response to our app.
Okay, let's talk about this embodiment argument. Why does thinking about the government or like having an opinion on what it should do assume a position of privilege?
Okay, it's not thinking, it's that you're having us we're going to be the policymakers. The problem is that I will never be in Congress because the way I speak, the way I work is too different. I get laughed at in Congress. So
I could never be in the
Question.
FBI.
I think
Yeah.
we want to draw a distinction here. Why does being AF and advocating that the government do something assume that you are role playing?
Well,
I mean,
that's the education you're going for. Is like we're going to be good decision makers and be able to do these things. It's practice being role
I
players.
don't think that is the education.
Then I'm not sure how we don't provide for that education. then.
Because your counter interpretation is just like we can be the AF.
Right, I mean, but your interpretation still like then doesn't have the internal link to how we're forced to do these things.
Either it links to our offense or we're not really sure what your offense is there.
Okay. Let's talk about case. You keep discussing this. I'm not sure of the person's name, but you keep it. Yeah. What does the AF do to resolve situations like that?
We reject things that physician-assisted suicide. It's the fact that doctors have like the power to tell us that.
We are
Okay.
the call that
Okay.
allowed for Amanda Vance to not be killed by
Okay.
a doctor.
I don't think people in this room are going to be the people that did this terrible thing.
You
Au
don't know.
contraire, like we all have relationships with disabilities. Someone might have this implicating decision of what am I going to do with like my terminally ill, non-responsive like cousin or brother.
Okay, yeah, but doesn't that require you to win that somebody in this room is going to have that relationship?
Everybody has relationships with disability.
Like,
Everyone does.
I know,
Yes,
Whether
but
you
for
choose
you
to
to
ignore them is
solve-
yours.
Doesn't that require that someone in the room?
It
You're going
means that
to
we have to change knowledge about disability and debate.
We have all 10 minutes.
Pardon?
We have all 10 minutes.
We do. It's a Christmas miracle.
Favorite time of year. Not really, though, actually, Christmas.
We'll just be right outside. So all that.
We have 6.
I did 6:05. Can you take that away?
I'll take it.
There you go. Got 6:05. So I know I was probably supposed to be doing debate things, but I decided to look up the live stream just to watch it. It's kind of a weird, like,
Hold on, where do you find the live stream?
it's on the college policy debate forum.
Okay. I'm gonna send that to my mom before they can
No.
see.
I already did that.
You're smart. Mom, if you watch, is this live stream gonna be like uploaded afterwards? I'm
Yeah.
sorry I did not send this to you earlier. Where would I find it?
Get a seat at Nationals.
Okay.
And it's smart. I found it on the college policy debate ones on Facebook. Yeah, I can't do this anymore. I'm just weird watching stuff.
I just sent it. I know that your partner's not here. But maybe him being out of the room will give my mom enough time to see that message I just sent her before my speech so she can watch that later. Dylan was smart and did it before the debate started.
I just got it up for you.
Oh, awesome, thank you.
Okay, I have a timer here somewhere. It's just gonna be T.
All right. How much room do you have left?
6:05.
All right.
Our interpretations of the act must affirm the resolution toward instrumental defense of the United States legalization of one of the topic areas. We have definitional support. Result requires policy should require a specific action. The United States is an instrumentality of the government, and legalization requires legislation and law. Our interpretation is educationally better than theirs. One is competitive equity. There needs to be a limit on what can be discussed in debate. To ensure both teams have a chance of winning. The resolution is the only non-arbitrary starting point, because that's what we've agreed is the topic of discussion. Legalization, their willingness to affirm the topic also allows them to cherry pick particular ground which kills negative ability to compete. All of their reasons why the topic is imperfect prove our argument. Yes, the resolution is not supposed to be perfect, just defensible for both sides. Competitive equity should come first because it shapes how the rest of the debate goes. Yes, you technically lose a game of Battleship when your opponent calls all of your shit, but if they have access and see your board, then it is not a fair game. 2, education. Debates are more educational when there's a predictable point of contestation. The negative argues that point should be the topic. It is the only non-arbitrary place to focus discussions. Failure to defend a point of contestation means we don't have good resource skills or education. These because it spills over outside debate and allows us to take important decision making and make these important decisions. The 99% of the time we're not debating. They say counter-interpretation. The critics can be failures sometimes it's big and everyone else confirms the topic. This explodes limits because it justifies infinitely more marginal or infinitely more marginalized groups to just say we get to go against the topic. We don't have to afford the topic. This means that every debater has to be prepared for both sides of every issue, which excuse the nature of the debate. The reason that we use the reason we have 5 topic areas or more is so that affirmative teams can get to know one really well, or 2 or 3 if they choose to, but they have to know the negative side of these more. These links or limits is that we should not have to have disadds to both sides of the topic. We don't have to have advantages to PSS for every debate because the affirmative chooses PAS bad. They say we still get ground-like process counterpoints. 1, the process counterpoint that they describe, and this is important. The legalized PS with regulations to help disabled people is a topical version of the act because regulation is a part of regulations are included in legalization. That's the Weitzer evidence for the 1 and C. But it also, their argument they lost to this argument is they raise a reason why this is a defensible position. It doesn't have to be perfect. Sure, they can have ideological disagreements with the thesis of this evidence, but it doesn't change the fact that this is still a defensible position, which means that it is an important part of the debate that they are excluding by not affirming the topic. Next, they say their emphasis is key to make sure that we can talk about PAs, because otherwise we'll never talk about PAs. This is just not true. There are still teams that are repositioning assisted suicide. Teams have a defensive wide. Some teams have a defensive wide position assisted suicide would not be bad for disabilities. Just because Gonzaga decided not to read their PAS act does not mean that all teams do not. It does not mean that the other topic areas are not important to discuss, which is the reason why they're privileging PAS over other forms of topic. Means we don't get education about things like organ sales, which would be another topical version of the act. They would get to read they would get to read Disability Justice Act by saying that we should legalize organ sales because that has important implications for the disabled community. And on the neg, they can say that physician-assisted suicide is bad. They could also read UMKCCNTAF, which is a marijuana ableism act, which is marijuana ableism act. There's no reason why they have to talk about PS. Yes, it's something that they might feel is important, but that does not mean it's the only thing that we have to debate. Next is the behavioral training dissent. 1, We do not force them into a certain mode of thinking or force them into a particular behavior. The example version of the act that I did above for this. Also the institutions argument, which I'll explain more later, are all reasons why institutional legal changes can and defending the law are important prerequisites to understanding the behavioral training. They say able to swing, yes. They say able to swing. They still G version of the assault this argument as well because they still get discussions. They still get discussions of disability. We are not forcing them to. We are not forcing them to have to discuss suicide. This is a bad model. We'll get there on the suicide debate argument now. Say embodiment. We do not disembody them. One, we don't say that they have to say that ableism is good. They can defend other rest of the topic like PNS to help people with ableism or just other topic areas. All of these are at the very least defensible positions that some people write about in the literature. And we can have a debate from both sides to determine the relative truth value. The second is that the regulations solve argument. That's the first topic version of the argument right now. They say the impact of society violence, but only to be connected to offense. Arguments don't injure people, but policies do. Avoiding engagement means the act can never actually transform the institutions that produce exclusion in the first place. Anderson 6. Argument is not injurious to person's policies, or argument is not harmful to assert. But Harvard is saying that your injury damage your opponent's ideas. The identity is relevant, but should not trump argument. Apathy, placing democratic institutions these serious problem assertions of innocent differences glorified as politics democracy. It's not having the deficiencies in existing democracy. Making themselves acknowledging exclusion is vital existing. But existing exclusion is inherent. So it comes down to whether one wants to work with it as democracy in them, nor in a negative sense. Negative sense. Now go to the institutions argument. Our argument is the debate should be a training ground that teaches how to navigate these institutions in town, about institutions, the types of policies that they can accomplish there. Their failure to engage means that we don't get this type of education. We don't to talk about how one to change institutions when we leave debate, and two, how those institutions actually affect things. Their first argument is that the law is static and seeks to focus on similarities. This is a link to the status quo. In order to change the law, they should try to inform the law within debate and use that information that they gain to change it. The one and see Hoskins evidence is incredible. It says that legal changes are a prerequisite to effective action with regard to disabilities. That empirically, when they've worked through institutions, things have gotten better. They might not be perfect. Existing social norms might not be perfect for people with disabilities, but they're a hell of a lot better than they were. And they should have a pretty high explanatory threshold for why the law is irredeemable. The next argument that makes the bad has killed the law is not enough. The law is not enough. It's a negative argument because it proves that we need to learn how to transform the law and how to utilize the law. Advocating for legal change is not incompatible with disability consciousness. This is Waterstone 14. People with disabilities have been uniquely successful in securing federal legislation protecting them from discrimination. The modern disability rights movement is engaged in a constant struggle to enforce these rights. Disability law can and should do more to fulfill Constitution's guarantees of equal protection and full citizenship. Progressive theorizing about the Constitution is already happening in disability, and the disability causes advantage by not being part of this conversation by pursuing justice. Legislative reform advocates are certainly helping the American people with their obligation to flesh out and implement the Constitution's guarantees. Their own time, market their own time. Now they're the switch side debate argument. I don't think they handled this very well. There are only arguments that they cannot switch sides because it would produce violence. This is not true. They don't have to say that ableism is good. That is not the form of switch side we're saying. But we are saying that they should be able to say that PAS would not be bad for people with ableism, or just read a different topic area. The fact that they have read some examples of when PAS was bad for people with disabilities does not make it true, and does not make it 100% true. And their inability to switch sides and actually have this conversation means that we will never be able to determine the truth value in a deliberative space like debate, because they will never have to refine their arguments and answer their opponent's arguments. That's the mere evidence. And switch side debate empirically encourage progressive reforms that check neoconservatism. Mitchell and Seven. Switch side debate originates from civic attitudes that certainly both work against fundamentals from all strengths of the frame. Debate training is evident in tribe and catch-alls, contemporary public interventions of the success. former debaters and challenging dominant dialogue on homeland security points, the efficacy of education, academic debate, turning around for the future advocates of progressive change, market change, and then the last argument is just we get some ground. I answer that argument.
Yeah, before we go, we gotta
Oh,
get
did
the
you-
card.
Did I not send
we
the
never
Emerson?
got that card?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here, I'll send that real.
Emerson 6.
I must have sent that before I saved the thing.
Yeah, that's probably what happened.
I'm sending the whole 2C again. Open it. Let me know if it's in there. If not, I'll just make sure I send a separate doc.
Okay.
Also, that should be a marked copy of the entire 2C.
Okay.
Yeah, we got it.
Cool.
Okay. So if your suicide debate claims are true, why don't you have PAS good stuff?
Well, that's the argument I made at the top. One, we're negative. We should not have to say that PAS is good. We should be able to say
Yeah, but why don't you have it?
because we didn't read a PAS.
So then how do you ever get that education?
By debating other teams that read PAS.
Right, but so you never get the PAS good education though, like
I mean, we've done topic research.
right, and
But
yet you
hold
still
on.
don't have the cards.
Hold on. We are negative in this debate. Regardless of whether or not we read a physician-assisted suicide act, we are forced to negate you. Your choice not to affirm the resolution shapes all of the other
Yeah, but
portions
what
of
is
this debate
this
and
is-
shapes the framing through which this
Your
happens.
suicide debate claims implicate your ground claims. Why is it that your suicide debate claims, like, why don't you have, if you don't have, do you have the cards or do you not have the cards?
I mean, the question of whether or not we have the cards is irrelevant in the context of you did something that we think is problematic.
Okay, that's fine. And the institutions questions, how do disabled people navigate institutions when we are systematically excluded from them?
Yeah, so one, our evidence challenges the fact that you are
Yeah, it talks about like
systematically excluded.
able-bodied disabled people, people with disabilities that are not like Amanda Baggs who can't talk. How do you get those type of people, like
Sure.
things, like stop them from discrimination?
Two answers. The first is that one, through debate, learning how to navigate institutions, learning how these institutions
How
function.
does she get to do that in debate structures like this?
I don't know. I don't know her.
Okay, that's fair.
The advocacy argument that is made on case is also a reason for why, people with disabilities can navigate the law.
Okay, that's fine. Let's talk about your limits claims. Why is the topic perfect? Can we ever like have things that are beyond the topic?
Our argument is that imperfect topic good.
Okay, then why doesn't
hold
it?
on. Can we make a distinction between imperfect topic and super ultra fucked up thing that the topic does?
Well, yeah, we can make that distinction, but I don't think that it implicates this
Then
argument
how do we still then address the super fucked thing that happens?
be negative. When you're negative.
Okay, that's fine.
Like, when you're negative, you can address this argument.
Okay, with our counterinterpretation, it says it explodes limits and things. Why are we responsible for other people's debating?
Because we think topicality is a question of how debate should function.
Yeah,
So it's
but
a
why
question.
should we be responsible if like Townsend TW decides to read on topical action? Why should we be held up to that standard?
Well, all of the arguments we made are still reasons why you not reading a topical app is a bad thing.
Also, it's about competing models.
Yeah, it's about this debate, if we go for
Okay.
T, is a question of how debate
Okay.
should function.
That's fine. On behavioral training, at the point where you literally tell us how we should be acting in debates, how is that not forcing us into do what you think we should do?
I think that it's not as bad as you paint it, right? We
Really?
say
So
that
us saying something's really fucked up, you go, nah, it's okay. That's not telling us what we should be doing?
our argument is not that it's okay, it's that one, you should, like, hold on, I'm confused by your question, but I don't think that we are forcing you to debate a certain argument a certain way. We are saying that you should affirm the topic when you're asked.
Okay.
Emailing. Oh, hold on.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're good.
Yeah.
Minus 5 seconds. All right.
So we're at 6 even.
Okay, it's out. It's gonna be case then, okay. all right?
They say they're refusing to defend PAS. Key to change educational practice, but this is just not true. This was basically on the TV. They say that cheap knowledge production is key, but Tom Kelly and the K will call to question the productivity of their knowledge production because of the fact that the K the T says their question. Both arguments say that their knowledge production is bad. They say that the people in the Netherlands has already killed off all the people with disabilities. This is just simply not a true argument. They say because we have to change structures first. Structure knowledge production first. But you should prefer the analysis done on the T page about how they can change structures to be changed. Now you should also extend the advocacy group groups arguments that are reason and justification for why people with disabilities have access to the law in the status quo. Now you should go to the K. Your chief outweighs multiple global systematic dynamics are driving towards certain extinction now. Climate change, natural conflicts, and inequality guarantee great quality of life on a massive scale now. The adopting global frame analysis up front equips students to understand interlinkages between transnational issues, enabling effective analysis and diverting seriously serial policy failure. That's the Monbiot and Hinkle DeMiro evidence. All isn't specific action, but rather an analytical framework. Well, the whole about is that prioritized research is that most effectively plot the cause of global oppression. This should be prioritized in educational settings. This is long ago in 9 education is a place is taking place increasingly interconnected global world, which has an impact on every aspect of community life around the world. The flood world has important implications for educators' intensification worldwide. Social relations linked to localities in such a way that local happenings are shaped by events occurring many miles away. Learning framework accounts for the global practitioners need to practice new model citizenship that considers the connection between local citizenship as both transnational and local, rather than strictly national, exclusively local pedagogy must go to the increasingly globalized world now. They don't mean starting localized unit system analysis causes normative error. Easy app can never solve. This is God's instead of the modern world. And the world cannot be understood without segregating the whole. Most important unit analysis is a study of social change on societies, but the entire world system changes in organizations. Consequences of complex interactions on the local, regional, societal, and global perspectives. Now, the line say the universal approach is bad, but both of our link arguments but the strength evidence is fantastic on this question. That says that unless we have global systems of oppression, like the global systems of oppression, we will never be able to solve or the affirmative harms. An example of this is that their analysis of PS fails to include or ignores the fact that the fact that it ignores medical industry's capitalist motives as they relate to physician-assisted suicide. They're also the scholarship is bad because it doesn't account for the global South perspectives that you're talking about now. This sounds like I'm listing links on mission, but these are definitely links because we win the trade-off argument is rather than the strength evidence. It says that when you focus on local pedagogies, it trades off because of the fact that people become satisfied with the progress that they've created and not don't seek to alter the structures that create that, which means that the things that they have described will inevitably happen. They say they're reading from the United States and Europe. This is just exactly they say they speak from their position. This is the link argument specifically. The global perspectives argument is that we speak from a global perspective, and that is the only way to launch or to solve structures of disability and to solve the global threats that are isolated. They say that links more than we do. This is just not true. Because of the fact that alternative endorses the global systems analysis. Things like I said, above the medical industry's capitalist motives as it comes to PAS. They say systems like the Vader key. We think that world systems are hierarchy, and endorsing world system methodology is a better method for solving when the impacts that we see. They say pedagogy is first. We have during their pedagogy we can go for this argument without the K because the fact that they have conceded that the argument that it causes error replication replication, which was made, which was made about they say never deal with disability versus just faulty first function. The alternative is to solve the case to explain and not the social relations that construct disability. In the steps go endorsing that research framework. That analytical framework is key to be able to solve these you should solve proximity first. All this still proximate because it's just your endorsement of institutional of a research practice that has for global systems, unlike the affirmative they say that you can't see from a global sources. It's not true. The impact association, which was impacted by this ceramic commodity evidence, says that we never talk from a global perspective. Global perspective, we'll never be able to solve questions. Questions of disability now. Permutation, they don't get permutation. First, are you said the opportunity cost of policy is not methods letting them immediately afterwards Vegas assurance classroom presence prevents analysis of competing methods and also when he sees are incompatible there too. One of the link are in this person complacency decide that when he sees perhaps on individualizing body politics creates the illusion small scale protest is sufficient to address global harms of trades off analysis of systemic factors that trending evidence B is isolationism. Level performance fragment systems by causing review impressions as isolations of each other rather than mapping social power as networks of systems.
Okay, that's 707. That's the word. I got that. For sure. Okay. Okay, so I've got that 3:15 left on the timer.
You do?
Will there be new cards?
So the order, Case T Global Systems.
Okay.
Okay. Is anybody not ready?
They start out with an argument about how we're not actually able to change knowledge, however our act of failure, when as well as the embracement of that failure, actually makes us point to alternative values that in a world that hates us, how do we continue to exist in a world system that will always already set us up to failure? Because I don't know what other app I would, and that we would read other than PAS bad on this topic. It means that because of our personal predilections, because of the way that our disabilities position us, because the way we personally exist, it means that the resolution as well as debate norms will always position us as failures, because we never feel like we can be actually ethical in the context of the resolution that includes PAS. Because PS is always already risking their stable lives. It's always already risking too many people. Then all their arguments about Netherlands are actually simply just not actually true. That's been going on for almost 30 years now, which is why there's not really analysis of how many people already have been killed, because there's little to no palliative care for people that end their lives in Netherlands, which is why disabled people are like pretty much non-fucking existent over there. This is actually have mobile suicide squads and other things that go into people's homes and take them out if they're too depressed to go to the doctor themselves. Well, these things are factually true, whether you believe it or not. You should read, like, we can pull up like a litany of articles on this question. Just to say something from Al Jazeera that says, hey, these things don't take into account. As well as we already have an argument that you don't take into account the number of people trying to avoid becoming disabled, which is still a highly proportional number. As well as all their arguments about how we're able to check it does not matter in a world where people are not verbal as well as strict as failures. They will never be actually saved by these institutions because they're already too deviant. Your institutions only care about able-bodied disabled people, the ones that can be incorporated into neoliberalism, the ones that can function as the super crypt that by which all of their crypts get measured, the ones that we should all strive to be. And this is always the impact term that the app says that we can never actually have full access to these things because they're always trying to communicate along certain bodies excluding them. The complete concession of handle it away evidence is going to be devastating on the rest of the debate, especially about institutions, because the way that we always try and change knowledge is just through simple little reforms rather than fundamentally cutting across genealogies of knowledge. It's different ways that disabilities always already be in positions deviant, which means that this evidence is much more specific on the question of liberalism and disability, which means you should prefer it, as well as all of their arguments about institutions always recreate that we should just change the little functions rather than radically reorientate ourselves for knowledge. Look, their argument is that we can have this education when we're neg when we never debate PSF. This argument is nonsensical because we never actually get to have a point in which we are forced to call it the debate community. They keep on saying we can do it on the negative, but they still need to prove that people will read this app against us. That happened once at the beginning of the year at UMKC round 2, before people knew that we were a crypt team, before people were afraid to bring PS against us as well. I think at least the comments of the rest of our district prove that people don't want to read PS against us, which means that this is a unique education key. Even if we're not winning that claim, we will win the education. The app is uniquely important in this context. All of their arguments, they make limits saying how our counter interpretation resolves the entirety of this. Because they just here that crypts can be context in the failure of PAS. Our interpretation allows for crypt debaters like me and Chris to be able to call all the top community, all while not justifying other explosive topics that have no relationship with the topic ours, but still has to be predicated on the topic, as well as predicated in the topic area, which means that we fundamentally resolve all of your brand switch side claims, because you should just have the opposite of what we say, which is what switch side means. You said you did your topic research, and it means you should have these cards. Well, the fact that these things are always already indicate that like PS so only gets favored when we're not in the room, which means we never get to lead the discussion. Our interpretations key to be able to call these things. They also all the complete concession of equal spending dissent means all their arguments about how, hey, you could just do this, just get over it, or literally them just talking over us and not listening to what we're having to say, that we have principle and ethical objections to the resolution, that people don't listen to us and just talk over us. This always recreates disability on the back burner, which is always going to be a dissent to this argument. They also don't have enough work on behavioral training. They just say we don't force them into it. Just, hey, read a teen version of the app. Just do something that is not what you are currently doing in order to make your behavior more palatable and acceptable for us, in order for it so that it's something we're easier able to engage with, less frustrating, so we have something to respond with. These are literally all these same justifications that people are told to stop flapping their hands or stop engaging in a specific way, because they're going to try and they need to make a form be content distinction, which means that we just get assimilated into a violent community that continually tells us change your behavior, you are not good enough because you are not like everyone else, which means that this always recreates the psychological violence. You see there's arguments that injure people, however, yes, but no, autistic people commit suicide at a higher rate than other people, not because of physical policies or anything like that, because they have already been subjugated to told that our behavior is wrong, which means that we still feel uniquely forced in these things. All other arguments, this is the most proximate cause of violence. We need to be able to practice being proud, self-love in this community, the community that actively hates us. We are winning uniqueness, that debate actively propagates bad notions of disability, which means this is an integral discussion of these things. I already covered, they make a couple of teachers from the athletes. Besides, obviously, when you do able explaining the behavioral training, that you should have done these things elsewhere, but this is all, there's also the embodiment set that these are not our acts because it's not the main problem we have with the resolution. It's not what we think of when we think of this topic. When we think of this topic, we will always already be thinking about PAS because the way it positions certain disabled bodies was all geared topical versions of the app are examples of people becoming successes, integrating into civil society rather than radical failures, which means still not our topical version of the app. I've already covered the institutions debate because this is completely walked by the candle evidence that these are simple, small legal changes. Things like the ADA don't actually incorporate disability, as well as all the switch checks and neocons. It means that you should have had all these arguments. No distinct reason why switching just on the resolution would be these things. Well, the process counterplan should be winnable because one, we've lost to it before, but it still means that we're ethically disagree with it, which is why we shouldn't be forced to defend it as well as not about top version of the app global systems. Look. This is pretty simple. When they have an internal link that says you should not speak for all perspectives and then say you have to have a global systems analysis, this is what always allows for imperialism, as indicated by the Thulian Law 13 cards. Well, they don't do enough work in the permutation that we are already global analysis of things. That we're a hypothetical, and the permutation is just a hypothetical test of two methods. It's not a reason that we shouldn't have a permutation. It compares the opportunity cost to be negative to the affirmative as well. We can resolve their illusion arguments because we are trying to be practicing more integrating the world of analysis. So we're all about the neoliberal structures of capitalism that end up positioning disability and disabled people in a specific way, which means that we might be local, but we're always within the context of larger capitalism.
6. just about pull this here on my right shoulder.
All right.
It'll be the critique, T, then the case. Are you all right? Critique, we're not going for it. We'll concede the permutation. It's just a sense of competition to go to topicality. I'm going this because they have mishandled a few core pieces of offense. The first is the fairness argument that I make at the top of the 2-1 They stack the deck and get to choose what ground they get and what ground we get, which is not ideal, which is not ground that is decided by the topic, but rather arbitrarily cherry picked. This makes it possible to be negative. This makes it possible to be negative because we always get stuck with the worst type, with the worst ground that's not rooted in the literature of the topic. Now they conceded two components of this. The first is that they do get to cherry pick. They do get the ability to say that PAS is good, or we have to read a process counter plan, even though they did not read a plan. The second portion of this is that fairness should come first in terms of debate. The analogy I made in the 2-1 is the battleship argument. Yes, you might lose in battleship if your opponent can see if the opponent gets all of your votes, but if they can see your board, it's not a fair game. Yes, the QAR might be very, very persuasive, and you might think that their impacts outweigh the F, but if they get to choose this ground ahead of time, they have a structural advantage which makes it possible to be negative. Only affirming the topic solves this one. The second is that I don't think they have an on-point answer to switch side debate other than as a theory. Their only response is that we should be able to switch sides, but this is just simply not true. They have conceded switch side as a theory. This means that in order to be an actively informed citizen who can make real political change outside of debate, our types of education, our truth claims have to be tested rigorously. We should have to understand both sides of the argument. So either A subpoint, we don't fall into dogma, and just assume that what we think is true is true. Or B subpoint, so if we know what is true, we can actively articulate responses to the most persuasive arguments from the other side. This is a reason why, even if it's true, we are not switching sides in this debate. We switch sides in other debates. We read online gambling after go negative against online gambling. We read marijuana after go negative against marijuana. They need to have this type of education in order to further their knowledge and in order to further create better knowledge production, which turns the F. I don't think that they've responded to this. Their only argument is that we didn't switch sides in this debate, but that's an unrealistic expectation when we are negative. The third is the institutional competence debate. I'm going to do it all here, but it also includes cross applications from the case debate. They've conceded the link to this argument. Debate should be a training ground where we learn how to navigate institutions and use them to transform. Well, they conceded the institutions are transformable, and that sometimes those transformations have actual tangible effects for people with disabilities, which is a reason why we solved their offense. Their only answer to this is an accessibility dissent, but I don't think that the accessibility dissent takes out the link or the impact to institutions, which means we still get a full weight. But I'll answer the accessibility dissent here. The Hoskins evidence from the 1NC indicates that it is empirically true that disabled people have been able to access institutions, and when they have been infinitely more successful with creating material changes than when they have not, which is a reason why we should use debate as a training ground. Maybe the way, if you voted F, if they voted top left, it would not actually change institutions, but it would give us the knowledge base to go through and affect those institutions in our everyday lives. Now, they say that nobody reads PAS, so they'll never get this type of education. The few arguments. First is not everybody will switch from reading the PAS because some will have a defense of PAS in terms of ableism. Additionally, I don't think this argument, as offensive as the 2AR is going to make it, because it's not the only form of good topic education. It's certainly not the only good form of topic education in the context of disabilities. They have functionally conceded 3 different topical versions of the act. The first is to legalize organ sales. That has a huge bearing on people with disabilities. This will allow them to have this type of education and lead these discussions when they are affirmative, which solves the impacts of all of their arguments. It might not follow the same internal link chain, but it still solves the psychic violence arguments in the arguments about disabled people not being able to participate. The second is the process counter. When they say we should read it on the app and say that there's a regulation. They conceded the whites are evidence from the 1 and C. They conceded the whites are evidence from the 1 and C says the legalization requires a regulation. Oh, by the way, interpretations. Resolve this policy, should its action, U.S.'s instrumentality, legalization requires law. I almost forgot all these things. They do not mean because they advocate against legalization of one of the top peers. Now go to They say able to money. We top lawyers think they have solved this argument because they're being incentive to engage if they read an act that we negate the fact that they are scapegoating us and saying that we have to ignore them because we don't have things to say the behavioral training argument. This is going to be the 2AR, but I don't think it's a particularly good argument for a few reasons. First, top version of the unsolved. We are not saying that that they have to debate a certain way. We are saying that they should defend the topic so we can have the best discussions. Our Anderson evidence Anderson evidence indicates the institutions turn the impact of this, which is psychic violence. I did the argument above because policies can actually materially change affect people and institute psychic violence. Arguments can't, and not all behavioral training is the same. We are not telling them that they should speak a different way, they should be or do something different. We are saying that they should enter from the resolution so we can talk about different things. And they say that they say the embodiment. They said switch side debate is an impact term that they say they are so certain that they know that topics bad. That doesn't matter because they should be able to refine their argument through the process of switch side debate. Debate is about competing models. It's about the processes through which we do things. I answered the switch side debate checks neocons and their process counterpoint argument below. On the case, I don't need to do much here. They're O'Hanlon evidence. I answered on the institutions page. Institutions are not irredeemable. Just because they have not done enough does not mean we should not engage them through debate.
Seven, that's right.
I know where I got.
I don't know.
Am I good to fill this out?
You have 3 minutes, 7 seconds.
You
Just maybe just talk to you. If you do need to go or.
Well, I was just gonna get water set in front of you.
Where's the case? Top county. This will be an overview on top. Is everybody okay? Everyone ready? All right. I think that there are a couple of problems that you and I are going to be pretty devastating and make it pretty easy to vote out. First is they drop the Campbell evidence, and we need to change things at the level of knowledge. And therefore, their chance of reform only gets to at the bottom of the 2 and R, but does not give any reasons why reforms are intrinsically good. However, our Campbell evidence is pretty indicative of the fact that disability is always placed at the level of reform and never at the level of knowledge to be able to change the ableist society, the ableist structures that happen in the first place. All their cards are indicative of the fact that disability is something that we can help, and we can be able to be less discriminatory, but never do we actually go into the realms of knowledge to be able to change the ways that disabled people are viewed within society, the unique ways that they are impacted, but through systems like PAS, we never able to address these things because they're not good enough for us to be able to talk about. We're not the reasonable man in law, or we're not like the reasonable man in law, which are kind of talks about specifically how these are the way that laws already predicated, which means that there's at least a great risk that the institutions are irredeemable. While his hard disabled people to be that is necessary, bad for us to be able to engage with institutions. They're also not engaging the fact that disabled people cannot engage within institutions. It's bad for us to be policymakers. There's not a word of that in the 2 hours, which means that we are necessarily key for us to be able to understand that we cannot be in policy, we cannot be policymakers. That's going to link into the embodiment to say which they do not do any work on the fact that individuals can never always divorce from our own identity because we're always told to be the policymakers. They say that you don't have to divorce yourself, but that is exactly what you're doing when you're telling us that we have to defend the state. We have to be prefer to be the role players to defend what the state does. We don't read our regular hedge impacts. That is not what we want to do. That is also not what we are. We realize that the way that we are indicative of the status quo, that the way our bodies work do not allow us to meet those types of normative expectations. Also, they does not. Main thing on the framework you're going to look to is that they are not looking for a form of practice. Any of their topical works they have, do not looking for that we are constantly pushing against these structures. This is not about help or disabled people with organ cells. Apart from the fact that I have no idea how the fuck that solves the app, that also is the point that it's not the continual practice that's necessary for us to be able to resolve these types of oppression. The status quo, that means that maybe there's a risk that this goes and it has some type of fairness things, but this is really better for disabled people because it's the only way we can be able to advocate ourselves and be able to push against structures like the bank, to be able to change these types of things. There's no way that they can change the structures of the bank to make them less ableist in the world of the counter interpretation. Okay. Well, onto the framework proper. I'm pretty much there anyway. First, we say in the counter-interpretation that crimps can be failures in the context of PS. They try and lock us into the broad structural claims that we explode limits. However, I do not know how that is, and we are specifically rejecting one part of the topic by just flipping to the other side. This is not a explosion of the topic. There's no arbitrary fairness claims here. We also give them what type of ground they are able to get, and they just choose not to run those arguments. I'm sorry that you didn't think of running those in the Wednesday, but that's not our fault. That's yours. You need to be able to defend these types of arguments, especially if you're reading them, especially against apps like ours. People have been running these types of apps for a while. If you do not have your generic PAS good stuff, then that's not your fault, not ours. There's people who run, there's several teams that run PAS good, PAS best, they should be able to do this. Also, they say that they were able to cherry pick the grammar, but also I think we give a pretty good distinction of what the demarcated limits are there to have a rejection of a specific topic area, but just taking the opposite side. I don't think, especially since we do not there's no reason to give us the way that all other teams run their arguments. I mean, this is probably a justifiable legal ground. It also allows for individuals who are disenfranchised with the topic to be able to talk about these things, which is key to education, which they have said with their friends. The switch side comes the fact that they do not want to read PS code, which means we are the only ones getting any type of internal link to education in this round because we are allowing for more understanding of a topic area which they are not willing to discuss. Means that it's also going to go and get out of all of the fairness comes to the fact that they're education is going to outweigh fairness because the only way we can have non-arbitrary limits. Fairness is always the way of how we think things should be, but education is actually what we gain from this round. It's the only thing we take away is the fairness of the round, which means we are necessarily key to do this. They say switch side is the theory of it. It's not change the fact that you do not do it in practice, which means you're not able to solve. They say they have a better knowledge, but actually they give no reason to. I think we give our 10 levels a pretty good idea of how we're able to do this. They say we should be a training ground. I already answered this with the institutions above. They say that they switch sides. However, they do not switch sides to PS code, which means we're always getting to those forms that they're never getting the forms of good education, which means we are necessarily good for those types of education.
If other round solves, so do us.
Yeah, if other round solves, so do us. There's no specific reason why we should be punished for those sort of things. All they say that we do something bad, but they don't really give any type of real impacts coming in here. I'm not even sure what the impact to fairness is. Besides, you don't have ground. I think we give pretty specific places where you can't have ground. They say T version that we are scapegoating them. I don't understand how we are we are not. We're just saying this doesn't solve the evidence. It's not good for disability. We're also commodifying all disability studies and all disabled people in this. This solves disability instead of the specific structural analysis that the 1AC talks about with disability justice, which they are not being able to grapple with. I also think the biggest thing you're being able to look here is that the fact that they do not do any work on behavioral training. They're saying that we should defend the topic. It's not just the way that you are telling us how we should be doing. The fact that individuals who are put into ABA therapy are told this is how you should act. You said that word, that's wrong. You do this, you're wrong. This is a way of the vinegar in your face because you are not, this is not how you should be doing these things. This is the way that debate told me. When I was in my high school year of debate, I had a judge who told me, you're too loud in cross-section. Why the fuck are you so loud? Why are you doing this? This is the way that individual debate propagates the same notion of psychological violence that makes individuals unable to represent and advocate for ourselves. That internally all of it. That internally turns all of their any of their education and fairness because we're never able to talk about these things because we're too afraid for us to advocate for ourselves. We never learn about how disabled people are implicated by systems like PAS because we're constantly afraid of being able to be here in the first place. This also means we can't ever have any type of education because if we are unable to feel like we can talk for ourselves, we can never talk to the disabled people, and we can never have a chance of fairness because we're never able to speak out about things. This is a way for us to be able to speak out and recognize the unique ways that this topic is fucked up and how we need to be able to change these type of things in the first place. Our practice is the only one that's able to get a better chance of making things more fair for individuals, and not just more fair for those who the system was made for. All your procedural fairness arguments do not change the fact that the topic was made unfair, that the fact that we have to sit and PS debates and they have to tell us that PS is good for us, and the fact that we tell people in the community that we are talked over, that we are going to be able to change these things in the status quo. Yeah, I have to spell failure.
Anybody else wins?
I'm Will.
Well, and Dylan. Cool. Pleasure meeting you. Mark, to meet you. Nice to meet you.
And your name is?
Chris.
Would y'all mind emailing me the institutions cards?
Yeah.
My email address is, I'll give you a second. I'll here. Good. Paul J 567
567.
at gmail.com.
I got it.
No, I just want to go fix it. Not gonna lie. Listening stickers.
I already have two.
Dylan, you have a marked version of where you mark this card.
It's under a sphere. be really funny if this was the failure.
Paul, do you think I have time to go hot down a cigarette?
Yeah.
I want to go outside.
Is the live show still on?
Yeah.
Hi mom, if you're still watching.
Jeez.
I'm so awkward.
That'll be the case.
Oh, that's good. I read that.
Who's Chris and who's Mark?
That's Chris.
Who's Will and who's Dylan?
Will.
Yeah, you're right.
All right. All right. I'm going to negative in this debate. I think that the negative is sort of they've won sort of a basic fairness argument that I don't think is the sort of thing that can outweigh the AF. If the AF is, I think, winning a very compelling, set of offensive reasons why your education and ableism arguments are, sort of substantively precluded by what the negative has done in the debate. But I think that there are sort of two major issues that are two major questions that are sort of begged by the affirmative approach to the debate. I think, for example, the affirmative you'd be in a great spot in this debate against a team that either normally read a PAS app or a team that read a PAS app that wasn't reading it against teams that tended to read ableism, because I think in that respect, you are then pointing to a spot where the education that the app provides is kind of like very necessary and needed, because it's then providing a corrective to the problem that you sort of identified. I don't think that you won conclusively in this debate that they were a team that was in need of this particular version of education, right? Or certainly, I certainly would have to be persuaded that the argument, like that there was no chance under their framework that questions and matters of ableism could be addressed, right? And especially, it's like floating in my mind is like, if we're not responsible for what happens outside of this debate round, then I don't know what relationship it really has to the other norms. You know what I mean? So it's sort of like, just like they're not responsible for Gonzaga or whatever, but also like y'all might not be responsible for other aspects that we read. It's like, okay, sort of like the little question itself. But I don't think that you sort of like, I read like two levels of impact of the affirmative, one of which is sort of based on like shifting the sort of set of norms or attitudes that are taken within the debate community, these problems and questions, right? Norms and those sorts of attitudes are built on a personal basis based on what people do. And so I think when you're reading something that's the opposite of the thing that the resolution says, I think that you need to do a little more to connect something that they did in this debate to, right, that particular practice, right? And I think the thing that's really like, I think hurtful for your position ultimately in this debate is, I don't think that the 1ARs is really covers very much. I don't think the 2AR sort of explains enough why the debating about ableism under certain other areas of the topic would not provide some sort of level of education about ableism. And I don't know that it's sufficient, right? Or whether it's necessary, but these really aren't threshold questions that are sort of brought up by the affirmative. And I think, are there reasons why I could suppose that debating about ableism in the context of marijuana or debating about ableism in the context of organs isn't sufficient? Well, certainly, right? But I think absent proving, right, that if it's what happened in this debate that matters, that they are folks that are in need of this particular version of education, I don't know why the sort of like general must raise consciousness about the issue of ableism is not solved by that, right? Sort of counterfactual of their proposal. So that sort of said, I think at that point, it sort of becomes difficult, I think, for you to win an offensive argument, because there is a kind of like, I think, disconnect between how some of your impact framing is going down, which operates on like the basis of almost like interpersonal stuff, i.e. like they're trying to sort of tell us how to behave or tell us how to act. And this is just like a general question for everyone that they sort of think about is like, what approach could they take that wouldn't be presenting you with an opinion that they have that's different?
Well, I suppose the distinction there would be on a read a process counterclaim rather than read it as this could have been your app.
But the process counterclaim is a topical act,
Okay.
right? Because it's just PAS with regs.
But that's still like attempting to change your behavior. So I still don't know how that gets out of that unique form of offense.
So what I'm saying is you have to think about what does it mean if there's no set of argument that one could imagine that wouldn't violate the claim that you've made.
Well,
About sort of like norming behavior.
Well, and I suppose my distinction that I'm trying to draw here is the distinction between running that argument straight up in like the 1 and C versus saying, here's what you could have done later in the debate, right?
Right. So that part I don't get that at all.
Okay.
At any point in the debate. And so it's like, yeah, so maybe you would want to emphasize that more in the future. Because I was like, one thing that I was just sort of thinking about was, I assume there has to be some space for disagreement, for debates to happen, and that like the existence of disagreement does not in and of itself like immediately mean, right, that we're like in positions of absolute opposition with one another. And so, the position that they've taken, which is that you sort of like I think that there are reasons why, politically speaking, right, you may be on very strong ground to suggest that the position of assisted suicide and constitutionalism is, right, very politically problematic. So there's kind of like this weird double bias on operation where if it's like so prima facie, right, not something that anybody wants to get behind or wants to do, then and that means we shouldn't have any more debates about it. Then other than in a spot where somebody's reading this app against you or refused to read it against you because they're hiding their ableism, right? And in that case, man, what a devastating argument. Then it raises a question about whether that's a problem. And conversely, right, if it's not overwhelmingly prima facie true that it is in fact a problem, then to inveigh right on the side of saying we can't take that position at all because it's complicit in violent ableism, also sort of, you see how that sort of.
Yes, I get that. I suppose the distinction that we then try and draw is like, I guess this argument wasn't really in the debate, but like there's always going to be some form of like kind of psychological violence, or at least minimalized. But like the distinction for us is between forcing us to defend it and allowing us to have kind of some discussion of it that is still able to reject it, I suppose.
Right, and so my question is like, if reading an app that's about ableism that isn't about physician-assisted suicide enables an addressing ableism issues, but without the attendant like psychological violence associated with the PAS topic, right? Topoi, as I shouldn't say, then like that seems kind of like a compelling reason not to produce more debates over it, right? Than you have to in order to shift the social norms into this.
I suppose then that really what you're looking for, I suppose, then is kind of drawing more distinct offense from like rejection of PAS, I suppose, or like why that discussion specifically is key. Because you're telling me right now other topic areas solve for our concerns, right? At least that's how I'm interpreting it.
Yes, well, I think other topic areas solve the concerns / the concerns you have within this topic area are not necessarily concerns germane to this debate.
Okay,
Because
but I mean,
they're not usually reading
I
this
get
out.
that, right, but then how do we ever get to call out anyone in the debate community, or even the inclusion of this topic in the debate community, period, then?
Well, so if you debate somebody that doesn't read PAS, couldn't you be like, you didn't read your PAS app, this is your.
Right, I mean, and that's why, like, but that's the problem, is we don't get to, like, debate those teams, like.
But like, well, you do, they don't read their PAS app, right?
Fair.
So what I'm saying is, and this is like an argument I've seen lots of teams deploy, is you change the app you read against us because strategy, you're afraid of us, you're ashamed of your discriminatory politics, right? And what I'm suggesting is that the very spots where people are doing that,
Is
Are
the
the-
only time is our apps really important then?
those are the spots where it's most needed as a
Okay, most
corrective.
needed, but like, it still seems like you're displacing the importance of our app in general, that like, you know.
But the general importance of the app is about generalized
Okay,
ableism,
yeah, and
not
so then
specific
it goes
to
back
PS,
to
which is why
tying
the
our
top
offense
version of that.
specifically to the inclusion of PS. So like, there's a brief line in the 2AC that was like, including PAS causes you to devalue like chronically ill or other terminally ill people in your life. Do you think more offense from that kind of would resolve concerns?
It could, right? Because there was that exchange that was sort of like, we know that people will encounter disability outside of the space of this debate and in their life. And so changing their attitudes and actions about that could be really important, right? I was sort of forced in this moment to, confront my own potential, future complicity, with the PAS question and the question of ableism. And so, yeah, I mean, that gets you a lot closer because it gets you to a claim that sort of gets beyond. But I think that framing of the argument really fell to black in favor of a frame that was more kind of like, I think you've got some very well put together frame for the norming, the behavioral norming type stuff, and I see the appeal in that as like a kind of way, especially against, and I think in this debate, the way that they read framework seems to be a little more textured probably than people say it sometimes. And so I can imagine these like ableism arguments working, I think, more intuitively. And then the other thing that I thought, this was sort of like neither here nor there, was I think there maybe just needed to be you need to kind of pick your battle on institutions more and like either really spend the vast majority of your last speech on that, just generating that as external offense to a framework, right? Like I thought that the way the debate kind of went down was both teams were like, we got cards, they're good. Meg is like, failure of reform is evidence of failure of reform, not that reform is bad. And you're sort of like, well, but there are these cultural factors that mean that those reforms will, always be kind of triangulated, something messed up. I didn't think that the quality of debating on either side could fully resolve that question. I did feel like pushing hard on reformism equals bad, that's something that was offensive and it was kind of independent of what was happening on framework. So you could win, not independent of what I'm saying on framework, but independent of the debate about fairness and independent debate about the micro level links to the PAS and ableism norms. And so if you just win reformism bad, then you kind of impact her in the thing that they've said. I don't think they can necessarily really kick it. And it's like, that's the terminal impact of suicide debate. And ultimately I thought that the gains on that for the neg in this debate were a little positive, but mostly marginal in the sense that I thought you were doing a much better job of sort of cutting off that they had substantial offense and then like winning a big magnitude link to cherry picked, tough to debate against, right? Even if at the end of the day, I thought that the sort of like terminal impact to the stuff on institutions was a little murkier. And I thought too that there was sort of like a question about the app to me seems to be saying we aren't included in institutions, so that's a bad scene. You were just sort of like, well, the ADA, this stuff has sort of done a fine job, although the app seemed a little specific in their responses to that in a way that was kind of persuasive. I wonder if like there's not a distinction between institutional inclusion in the sense of being in formal representation, as opposed to like institutional interaction, which seems to be like that second part of the argument that I think is in your evidence, but is not as clear in the speeches, would do a better job of responding to what they're saying, I think, than to just like, we might be policymakers one day. Not really, but like, I mean, you're gonna have like, civic associations and you're gonna like have a life and there's gonna be like moments in your everyday life when you interact with institutions and like you do or don't have these moments of like related to ableism, potentially related to suicide, pause, right? That's why there needs to be this clear delineation about the physician-assisted suicide specific ableism offense, because that general sort of stuff about like the portable skills related to just like being a better citizen, like not a rude Gus, that's the kind of stuff at the topical version that the app would be able to sort of solve.
I mean, so I still want to know how you're evaluating the behavioral training. Like, is it just they outweigh behavioral training, or do you not think there's a link?
I think, yeah, I think that the behavioral training argument presupposes that the thing that they do is an opportunity cost with advancing, right, the perspective of your politics.
Well, except for, no, I mean, not in my mind, right? Because still performatively in this round, they're saying, here's how your behavior could have been different, rather than being like, even if it's an opportunity.
This is why I asked earlier, what argument in debate isn't saying
Right,
you
like
could
a
have,
counter plan, right? Something that is not explicitly telling me to change
but
what
the
the app does.
counterplan you listed explicitly is,
Is a topical ad
it's a
there.
100% disagreement with what you said.
Yeah, which is why we don't want to run it, but we think it's net ground.
Well, I get that I get that it's net ground, but it's net ground that says, it's still net ground that says you're wrong about your thing.
Right, and that's the distinction is they're telling us we're wrong about our thing. We're cool with that, right?
Okay.
People defend PS good all the time.
Right.
What we're trying to specifically like work out right here is them telling us how our behavior could have been better. So the T version solves your offense portion. Is that feel like here's how your behavior could have been different, that your concerns wouldn't have been there in the first place.
But if they're propositional, for example, assume that they read the counter plan that's just PAS with ranks, which you described, right? Propositionally speaking, aren't they saying you could have been better if you had not said the thing that you said?
I mean, they're creating a competitive advocacy, but that's different than being like, here's the app you should have ran.
I think what Mark's delineation he's trying to draw is that the topical version is telling us what to do, where the counter plan is underlying like what type of method is best to resolve PAS, instead of just this is what you should have done for XYZ reason.
Right, so if the thing that they said resolve substantially the question of ableism, what's the DA?
It is that it doesn't, or I mean, like we would still impact turn it, obviously, like we would have disads, but like that debate didn't get to happen because they didn't defend that. They just told us.
I'm not talking about the top version of the acting one. I'm just talking, or not the one that's like.
You want to know the cap?
I mean like other area plus ableism.
Oh, okay.
Like, what about other
Okay, yeah,
areas
so,
plus ableism
I mean, but,
doesn't resolve
I still
outcomes?
want to know how that doesn't link to behavioral training still, is my distinction. Because I agree with you that that's why there was a discussion earlier about we need to have more PAS specific offense.
Right.
But it still seems to link to the argument of have a different discussion, don't just talk about how you're talking about it.
But the content of, right, the problem would be if so is this an impact that occurs at level of your subjectivity as a human?
Yeah, like the framework, yes, is behavioral
Okay,
training.
right, because even when you talk about consciousness raising, that's different from subjectivity,
Okay.
right? So it's like if the problem is a problem of subjectivity, then the 2AR would want to eject on all the impacts except psychic violence and say, this debate is just about psychic violence. You said that we should not have done what we did, which constitutes psychic violence. Now, I think that raises a fair question, though. What is a disagreement that doesn't commit an act of psychological violence?
I mean, I suppose we differ on that, but that's why, like,
Right,
we
yeah.
were talking about,
Consider.
what was, there was something that we were talking about that I thought like resolved that concern in my mind, or this, I'm okay with them outweighing, I'm not okay with a no. Like that distinction in my mind, because to me, like they very much, framework is behavioral training. It's telling you people, here's how you should have engaged in debate, as opposed to a counter plan, which is how we're going to engage as like an opportunity cost to the app. And so I'm okay with them outweighing, I'm not okay with the no.
But I mean, I read framework debates as having all of these counter plans in them. This thing,
But
this
like
thing.
they come later in the 2 and C when like I'm already time pressing the 1AR. Like if we could have had that nuanced debate up front in the 1 and C, we
Right.
like
Well, they're kind of making arguments about the debate that are like, right, because we don't have a quote unquote traditional advocacy statement, that there's some leeway that needs to kind of be given on that. So I think if the argument was made more explicitly in the 1AR with that verb, then I would probably process it more in the way you're describing it now, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just have one question. Should we even emphasize the advocacy groups argument to illustrate the difference between institutional engagement and institutional inclusion and institutional interaction?
I mean, I think advocacy groups is more useful as proof that society won't just do the most negative things that the app describes. To me, it's it could work for the institute, but I think that your evidence actually sort of distinguishes between. I don't read your cards as really advocating for role playing. Right. I read your cards as advocating for working with institutions. And then I think it's also if PAS is like a thinkable possibility, which I think it has to be for the app to have the rationale that it has for being right. So I think legitimately for good reason, terrified of policy. You have to sort of say, if there's a chance that some sort of physician-assisted suicide policy will be enacted in this country, what regulation or tweaking of that policy do we get out of deliberating about it more effectively? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know, so it's sort of like maybe the debate is whether or not PAS will have X, Y, and Z safeguard or not. And if we deliberate about it, we'll figure out what the right safeguard is. If we don't, we just get like the worst possible blanket PAS and model off of the Dutch system or one of these others. You know, so that's one way that I think kind of work that to make that better.
Two in our choice, was it poor or fine?
It was good.
Okay.
It was wise. I thought that the one error was smart to not spend very much time on.
Right, well, I was like, I think our ARBs are better on T, but coverage almost had to give for the K.
No, in that respect, I thought the one error in this video was great because, like, I think it was really a good job of trying to make you to make the wrong decision. You know, and then you did it, which was wise. You know, 99 times out of 100, when the one error spends a ton of time on T and not much time on the other K, if you go for the other K, you're going to lose because they'll be like, well, you didn't go for T, so we can do whatever we want. So this other K definitely doesn't link.
I figured, well, yeah, because my rationale is like, most of their offense on T, we would still have to answer. And so, like,
Yeah.
let's just go for T.
So like I think I did think that I thought that there were some really strong moments that you had in the cross X's in this debate. I did think that the one and R needed to focus more on just like the basic link to the critique, which was just kind of like they started locally and they shouldn't have started locally. Which is sort of a thing. And then another thing that I thought AF was like, there seems like the tension between their K and framework was pretty robust. You know, and so maybe point that out to try to create more problems for them. I mean, if you point that out, maybe it means that they want to like spend even less time with the T for it. The two AC is even less.
I guess I just don't really know how to do that very well. Like there's several things I could like conceded the impact and like term fields, but I didn't really know how to make like delineation like framework and these contradict. But I was thinking those are separate positions. What would be the proper way to do that?
I would say like, well, what you want to do is sort of say, all right, they say that we need to sort of start from this sort of global position, including the South, right? And then you say, well, they're like United States federal government or whatever, so they ain't that. You know, so you should be like, these two things link, right? And it means that there's no way they can kind of go for the K because they already wrote a framework. You can't unring the bell, right? And then that just lets you spend less time on it, less time on the T and 2AC because they probably can't go for it.
Okay.
You know, and then like in the 1AR, if they do try to keep going for it, all you need is like one generic card floating around, which is kind of like defending the government, you know, is super violent, right? Or whatever the terminal impact of critique is.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Good debate, everyone.
Thank you.
Good luck tomorrow.
Good luck.
Good luck to you too as well.